Hello and welcome to another episode of WhipChat. My name is Christian, and this week we are joined by Dakota Winrich. Welcome to the show, Dakota. Hi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is very exciting. I have been looking forward to chatting with you again since I saw you at WhipCon this year, but I've seen you off and on almost every year for one reason or another. But for those that don't know you, you have quite the resume. And I was just talking to you. I didn't know how to pare it down for a short intro because you have done so much, do so much. Just some of the highlights here that, I mean, you've been doing entertainment and Renaissance shows for 30 years.
30 years. I know. It's crazy.
Whips, stunts, knives since you were 7. I want to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't let my 7-year-old handle a knife at all, much less throw them. In fact, we have rules against that in my house.
Makes sense. Most should.
Most should. You've been featured on television shows like Ellen, America's Funniest Home Videos, and America's Got Talent.
Yes.
And you have 2 Guinness World Records, which
I do.
I want to ask you about that too, because I could not find them.
Right. I also don't remember what they're for. I feel like Adam might know if he comes back in, but I know I have a list. I've narrowed it down to what it could be.
Well, awesome. We'll have to post a link to them or something if we find them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's such a huge list here. I got to keep going. Well, I want to touch on each of these. We can talk about them. Of course, your business is DaKitty Whips that you started back in 2013, and yes. You originally were offering, and you were the creator of the performance hybrid whip.
Well, no, so I didn't create performance hybrids. Those were out already.
Oh, okay. My mistake.
Yeah. So when I first started, I was just making really lightweight, like 12 plat bullwhips, because that was something that I didn't see anyone else making at that time. And then that lasted maybe a year. And then I started making performance hybrids, but Whips and Whatnots and obviously like Paul Nolan were already doing performance hybrids at that point.
Oh, okay. Well, I apologize for the mistake. And I'm actually going to be talking to Paul Nolan soon, and I'll have to ask him about that too.
Yeah,
track
definitely.
Down where this started. Do you know how far back it goes? Where?
So to the best of my knowledge, performance hybrids, I want to say that Paul, he can tell you this too. I want to say that him and Lauren started calling them performance hybrids. Before that, they did exist, but they were kind of more of like a Florida style whip, and they were called pipe whips. So like that's where they started from. And then they just became more and more popular through the years. And now everyone uses them. It's crazy. So,
I mean, you put here, when we were talking earlier, you were one of the first people to bring the budget version of it into the market. So how do you split the difference there? What makes it the budget version versus what other people were doing?
So it's just having the handle instead of having all the braiding. So a regular performance hybrid, you have some there, will have like the grapevine on it, and it'll have the braiding on the grip and then the end knot. Yeah. Yep. And then the budget version is literally, it's the same exact thong. So the performance quality is the same, but it doesn't have any braiding on the handle. And so that just makes it a lot more affordable because it's like half the work. So you can sell it at like less.
So like the tennis racket grip.
Yeah.
Like this. Okay.
Yep.
Very nice. And they handle wonderfully, and it is a great grip.
Right. It feels pretty much the same. It's just not as fancy. So they're really great, like practice whips, or if you want to start whip cracking and you don't want to put like $300 into a set or more right away, it's a good option for people to work with.
Absolutely. That's people that's right at the price point where people feel comfortable kind of experimenting with a new hobby, that sort of thing. And you have made just a few of these in your life, I take it, right? Just a couple?
One or two. Yeah.
I'll let you say it. How many have you made?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know for sure. I was trying to figure it out when I wrote up that little thing for you. So in like the 10 years, I'd say, of whip making, I have made well over 1,500 whips. I think it's
1,500.
I want to say it's over 2,000, but I can't. I don't have like the backup for that, so I'm gonna go with a low estimate. 1,500 is 100%. I've made over that money. There will be times where I've made like 300 or 400 whips in a year, so it adds up.
Wow, that is so impressive. Hats off to you. That is really cool. And
Thank you.
I have when I've mentioned that I wanted to interview you to several other people, and most of them, that's one of their questions is, how do you crank out so many? How do you make them so fast? How do you keep your body into a condition to where you can braid that much? So any tips for people that are full-time braiding?
Yeah, those are definitely all like super important questions. I would say how did I get that fast is really just practice. Like I have been doing this for a lot of years, and what I'm making, so I'm mostly make performance hybrids, budget hybrids now. I do make bull whips, but I don't get as many orders for that. I make fire whips, but they go together really quickly. So when it comes to just braiding like a hybrid thong, it's also just part of how it's made, like I have all my patterns down to a science, so I can cut those out really, really quickly. I'll do big batches. So like right now I have 8 whips hanging up on my hooks that are all cut out. They're all ready to go, and I will braid those up tomorrow. And it really is just practice and knowing the exact pattern in my head, repetition, getting all of that done so that I can braid a 5-foot thong in about half an hour.
Oh my goodness. That's incredible.
But it's not even like I'm moving that quickly, it's just that I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know it's just muscle memory at this point. If I have to stop and braid something brand new, that's obviously going to take me a lot longer to figure out.
I see. So you know exactly what you don't have to make any decisions when you're doing it. You know exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I have all the drops in my head. I know exactly where they go. I have to, so it just comes down to like working with whatever color pattern and like how I want that to look is really the only thing I have to change for each whip. And as far as like keeping your body in shape, I don't know if I'm an expert at that because I'm probably not doing it as well as I should, but I've definitely spoken to chiropractors and had work done before. And they just say, if I stand most of the time to braid because I braid off of a hook and the hook is above me, right? So basically they would just say to stop every 15 minutes, stop braiding, stretch your arms all the way up above your head, stretch down, like just move your body a little bit, just walk around your living room or workshop or wherever you are, just to get like your muscles moving and your blood circulating. And then you can go back to doing it.
Do you have any pre-braiding stretches or any other preparations you do physically?
I don't. I should probably.
I feel
right. I have looked up some like different, and just from like YouTube, like stuff anyone can look up, different like hand stretches, because I will feel like my hands will often get like the most, especially if I have to make a bullwhip or something where you have to pull really, really tightly. I'll feel that in my hands a lot quicker than I will with like a hybrid. So that's something to keep in mind. I also wear gloves when I braid.
Oh, really?
Let's see, I have them. I wear workout gloves when I braid, right?
Oh, cool. So the half fingers, right?
Yeah. So they look just like that. Okay. And so basically that keeps like all of the damage off of my palm. So it's just my fingers that will have calluses on it. And that really, really helps preserve my hands in particular. And it keeps all of the dyes from the paracord off of my hands as well.
Sure. And I guess as a stage performer, keeping that, yourself as part of your presentation, that's probably very important.
It is. It's mostly too. So I specifically, this is just a me thing, but I have a form of eczema that it only affects my hands. So for me, it's really important for me to keep like my hands from getting too like sweaty or too damaged, or to keep any like chemicals off of my hands, which is also why I wear the gloves.
So it would really irritate it. And okay. Well, that's good to know, especially, even if people don't have, any irritation issues. I know that I get like callus or blisters. Adam posted a picture not too long ago. Tore his hands up.
Yeah. He's been working a lot with like the 275 cord, and that stuff tears your hands up because it's like you got to pull it really tight and it's so like thin.
Yeah. Wow. So you've gone through 2,000 whips and have yet to do that. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
A matter of time, I'm sure.
And I mean, we're just continuing on the list of amazing things that you've done here. I mean, they're being used in all kinds of amazing shows here as well. I was very impressed that you mentioned Cirque du Soleil, Zumanity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was super lucky to get Zumanity is no longer a show, but I was lucky enough to work with certain people who work in Vegas. So I'll sell a performer a whip, and then that performer will move on to a show, and then they'll recommend me to that show. And that's usually how I end up getting my whips into shows. So there was a performer that had already used my whips, and then he moved on to that show. And so their prop department contacted me and bought a whole bunch of whips for what they were using.
Wow.
Then Zumanity was like their like adult show, their kind of after dark show. So obviously it had whips in it. And then I just got an order that I sent out in January for a Broadway show. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, so I won't but it's a Broadway show that's coming this year. So that'll be really cool.
Yeah, when you can, be sure to post about it. That's very exciting.
I know. They didn't tell me not to, but I don't want to get in trouble. So
yeah, better safe than sorry. So your day job, if I call it that, is of course you're a performer at Renaissance fairs and festivals around the country, and you've been stepping up into here recently, at least, into more of doing more just to fill in a position. What has that been like, and how are you bringing whips into that as well? And what? Tell me a little bit about what you do there. Obviously, as Esmeralda.
Right. So my dad and his performing partner, Doug, have done a show called Don Juan and Miguel for over 40 years. They were doing it before I was born. They started in the early 80s. Yeah. And they right before this so we are currently working a festival in Arizona, the Arizona Renaissance Festival. And it opened just a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately right before we opened, Doug got sick, and so he's been out for a couple weeks, and hopefully he'll be back soon, but we're not quite sure when. So our trio has turned into a duo show, so now I'm just doing a show with my dad, and we are very lucky to actually have done a duo show this past summer in Pennsylvania. We had 6 weeks of doing a show together. So we had some backup. We had something we could fall into. We weren't necessarily prepared to do it just a few days before opening, 5 months after we did it before, but everything worked out well. So we've been doing that. There's definitely whip cracking in it. There isn't like way more whip cracking than we did before. So we kind of added sword fighting. I'm not a great sword fighter, but he trained me to do a couple different sword fights. So we added that in, and then we do a whole big whip cracking section in the middle where I cut a lot of targets, and we do a lot of targets cut like off ourselves. So like he'll cut a bunch of targets that he holds. I'll cut targets, and then I'll cut them off of his hands. And then we do a knife throwing section at the end. So I'll throw knives around him.
Let's do this. We gotta have a picture from your Instagram here.
Yeah, that's in the show in Pennsylvania.
That's awesome.
I love them. Those are fire knives.
Fire knives.
He's very brave.
That's your dad, right?
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. And you guys should check it out, the listeners, on Instagram here, DaKitty Whips. And she's got a wonderful picture here with your great costumes. Just beautiful.
Yeah, that was super fun. Their stage is really pretty too. You can see like how it's decorated. I love that.
Oh,
photo.
yeah.
Adam took that photo. He came out after he was doing a festival in Wisconsin, the Bristol Renaissance Festival. And after his last weekend, he came out and visited our fair so he could like check out the show and support us and take lots of pictures and stuff. So that was cool.
Do you have to do a lot of I mean, I imagine you do. On each of the different stunts, you have to obviously be proficient enough to do that, to do each of them. I'm not a performer really of any kind. I'm an IT guy. I solve problems. I don't perform. As much as people say I perform magic, I don't.
It's still very difficult. I mean, very different skill sets. I wouldn't say one's better or worse. They're very, very different.
I have never accidentally thrown a knife near my father, though.
Sure.
Or intentionally, for that matter. So tell me a little bit about becoming, especially like as a 7-year-old. How does that? I get, between then and now, I'm sure it's somewhat different. Mm-hmm. But what is that level of proficiency like, and how do you practice, and when do you know you're ready to like have a human being nearby?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started whip, like the first time I ever cracked a whip, because my dad and Doug did have a show already that they were actively doing, and my dad always likes to joke that having me in the show when I was young was cheaper than a babysitter. And so he would always have me at the stage, whether I was doing something or not. I was usually backstage or picking up props or helping pass the hat or doing something, right? So there was just one day we were at the stage and I picked up one of his whips and I cracked it and it cracked. And I was a tiny little kid and he was very impressed and he was like, oh, we're going to put this in the show. So once he knew that I kind of could do that, we actually ordered from Western Stage Props. This is like early mid 90s, I suppose. Ordered a VHS tape of like that like bullwhip, like how to crack a bullwhip or the bullwhip arts.
Mastering the bullwhip or whatever it is.
Mastering the bullwhip, there you go. Yeah. And he like sat me down in front of the TV, made me watch that. And then what he would do is that he would take a cardboard roll, like from wrapping paper, and he would tie or like tape a target to the end of it, and he would hold that out. And that's how I started to practice with cutting targets, so that if I missed, I had like 3 feet before I would hit somebody. And we just did that for like a really long time until I got good enough to not hit him, not hit the, not miss. And then he started putting me in the show. And when he first did that, I was probably like, by that point, like 9 years old, right? So I was doing little stuff here and there. And then when I was 9, he had me holding targets. So we had a whole bit where I would come out and hold a target and he would crack the whip and I would get scared and I'd run back and I'd come out with a glove on and he'd crack it again and I'd get scared again and I'd run backstage and I'd put big headphones on and then I would hold the target and he would cut it. And then finally I decided that we weren't going to do that anymore. And so we switched it. And so he would hold the targets and I would cut them. And then, ever since then, I've just been doing whip cracking in the show. So it wasn't like an immediate thing where I decided that I was good enough to do it. We definitely put some training hours in. And, we do between 3 to 5 shows a day outdoors. So the weather's always going to be a little different. When I first started, nylon whips really weren't a thing that people used. And so we were all using, kangaroo leather whips, which were very, I don't know, the weather affects them a lot more. And so we would definitely have days where we would mess up, and like we still have days where we mess up and you'd hit somebody or you'd hit, so that does happen, but you kind of just know you're ready when you know you're ready, right? So like if you're comfortable with another human being holding a target and you're not, that like if you believe you're not going to hit them, then like that's the best you can do, really, is you just need to act.
There's a little bit more grace there probably than, using guns or even the knives.
Sure.
Is it just that, but more so when you're throwing knives? Just have to be that much more confident? Or
it is really interesting. Knife throwing is not like just very basic where you're throwing around a person. It's not super, super dangerous. I know it does look that way, which is absolutely what we want. But it does. Knives, right? Yeah, the knives themselves, they aren't like kitchen knives. They're not super, super sharp. They are very pointy. But something I always try to explain to people, which is no one really thinks about, is that knife throwing is all about distance and math, right? So I'm aiming I'm standing at a distance where I want the knife to stick perfectly into the board, right?
Yeah.
So a person is going to be standing, 6 to 8 inches of even more in front of that board. So if I'm aiming so that the knife goes like this into the board, if I were to hit a person, that would still hurt. It would not be good. If, obviously you'd want to hit them where they're clothed, but the knife would probably only be about here, right? It's not sticking directly into their body.
Right.
But still, you don't want that to happen. So there is a lot of training involved. When I first started throwing knives with the intent of throwing them around a person, what I did was I trained for about 3 months, and I took a 2x4 and I put it just up, and I would throw into the 2x4. And then when that was really easy, then I flipped it on its small side, right?
Wow.
And then I would just throw all the knives up and down into the small side of the 2x4. And then when I could comfortably, easily do that without missing, I knew that my margin of error for throwing around a person was going to be about this much. So as long as I'm not throwing this close to a person, the chances of me hitting them are very slim.
And actually, looking at this picture now, if I add that back, you're obviously, whoops, wrong person here. Full screen. Yeah, the distance there is.
Well, those ones are also on fire, so he has to be a little further away.
A little farther back.
Right. And then I'm holding 2 more. So I'll throw 1 more up by his face, and then that last knife I actually throw behind him, so he gets sandwiched between them, and then he jumps out right away. So yeah, fire knives, those are, they just look super cool. Those are obviously a little more dangerous because I don't want to light myself on fire or him on fire, but they look so cool. You got to do it.
They really do. I hope I get to see you do this show or throw some fire knives at one point or another.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool to see. Awesome. So was it just over time that you keep adding little things into the show as a child? This is just part of what you do and you just keep growing your repertoire, or how did that grow? What was that like growing up?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely, as your skill grows, you kind of want to try different things. Because like I said, we're doing like outdoor shows and we have to perform them multiple times a day. We can actually, like, I can do much harder tricks than we would ever put into our show, because you want to have a level of consistency and just reliability for the tricks you're doing.
Right.
So there, to a certain, Adam will talk about this too, is like he can do a lot of very complicated whip cracking routines and tricks, but they don't really impress the audience any more than like some of the lesser, more like less difficult ones. So you really have to just decide what you want to put in your show. So yeah, I just started cutting one target that was maybe like this long, and I would cut it a few times, and that was what I started doing. And then we would slowly like shorten them, or we would put 2 very close together and I'd only cut 1, or we would do like a target that he holds like this in his hands and his fingers, and I would have to cut it without hitting him. And I'm realizing I'm trying to describe these for just listeners too, in case someone's not watching. We have a trick where we use cut up straws, like paper straws. And what my dad does is he'll hold a piece of paper straw between each of his fingers, so that it looks like he has a webbed hand, right? And then I whip out each piece of straw from between each of his fingers.
Whoa.
And that's probably like the smallest target cuts that we do in our show.
Wow. So that's about 1 to 1.5 inches, I guess. Yeah,
at most. And like that we built up to. There's like an old trick where you can whip like a penny off of someone's tongue. Like that's a trick that I can do, but we don't do because it just doesn't add anything kind of to the general show. So yeah, I would definitely say it's a process of your skill improving and then deciding what tricks you want to learn and then working on those tricks and then getting to a point where you can do something very reliably 4 times a day.
Do you feel like there's a pressure to change up what you're doing from year to year, or to do harder stuff from year to year? What is that like versus being consistent and
Yeah,
people want to come back and see the thing again.
absolutely. That is definitely, it's something that performers, I think in any environment, will talk about a lot, is the push and pull between people who always want to see new material and people who always want to see the classic things you've always done.
Yeah.
And you truly just have to find a happy medium between those two things. You have to also decide what you want to perform. There's, we have some shows where a lot of the material is new. We have a couple of shows that are just like improv-y, where we'll have like one or two bits that are always the same, and then we kind of mess with it throughout the show. But those shows overall don't usually perform as well as like the very structured, built over 30 some years shows that we have, because they're just so classic.
Yeah.
So you'll definitely get people who come every year and they're like, oh, it's the same show. But I always try to remind them that, like, despite the fact that they've seen the show before, we obviously want them to come back as a fan. But our show does have to be for the majority, which is new fans. So, like, in every audience, there's going to be the majority of people who've never seen you before. So you do want to kind of put out the best possible product for those people. So constantly working on new material and trying to put new material in a show doesn't always end up being the best material.
Right. I have noticed in some, as I've grown as a whip cracker and a consumer of whip cracking videos, I don't know what you call that. I can appreciate when I see you do a very difficult crack. I can see how difficult it is, and I know that because I've tried to do that and I can't do that. Like at WhipCon, people were doing some really stunning combination
amazing
stuff, and tosses and over the four corner stuff and all kinds of stuff. But when I was first getting into appreciating this, I did not appreciate the difficulty there. It just looked like a tornado of crazy whips going everywhere. Lots 100%. Of loud voices.
Yeah.
So I did not, like, for me, a Queensland crossover was just as impressive as, any of those impressive Australian whip cracking routines. Just because it's two whips going crazy. It's just, do you feel like there's some of that where we do something easier and it's just as impressive? Or do you like try to always put something that's technically difficult too? How do you balance those things?
I think that you for like the environment I'm in, which is a Renaissance festival, right? You 100% want to have tricks that you are proud of doing that are difficult. But I'm getting attacked by my dog. But you also,
she heard her name. Sorry.
You also want to make sure that you're just impressing the audience, right? I'll talk about, I have a lot of acrobat friends, and we'll talk about how you can do the splits and people are just as impressed as if you do the most amazing contortion work sometimes. So it's all True. Who you want to be and how you want to represent yourself and the level of skill you want to show. I also really like taking risk assessment into play when I'm deciding what tricks I want to do. There's an amazing show that is one of my favorite shows that is out there called The Danger Committee, and they do knife throwing. They also do some whip cracking. They do some of the most amazing, dangerous knife throwing stunts that I've ever seen anyone do. And I would be absolutely terrified to try to do that on a daily basis, multiple times a day. So their level of risk assessment is just, it's different than mine. So I do like to have hard tricks in the show. But overall, as long as you're impressing the audience with what you're doing, it doesn't have to be that crazy. Also, we are in very big stages and crowds, and a lot of times the audience can't see a 1-inch target being cut on a giant stage that's, 20 yards away. And so sometimes the bigger tricks it's easier for the audience to see.
Yeah, flaming knives are easier to see than non-flaming knives, I guess.
Flaming anything, yeah. If we can light it on fire, someone's lit it on fire.
I like it. Tell me a little bit about what this risk assessment idea. So what does that mean to you when you're looking at a trick? Like, Can you describe that? That's not a term that I use in my daily life.
So for me, risk assessment with tricks is, how am I going to be able to do this if it's pouring rain? Am I going to be able to do this if it's windy? If I'm tired, if I'm, not at 100%, am I going to be able to perform this trick without hurting someone else? And if I can't do that, then we either save those tricks for when I am at 100% in a show, or we leave them out altogether. Because it's not worth, because we have to perform so much, we're booked through an entire year. There's not really any such thing as a day off for us if you get hurt. So it's not worth it to me to cause an injury. And I also don't want to I work with my family. I work with my husband. I work with my dad. I don't want to actively be injuring them.
Right.
And they don't want to either. So I try really hard to just kind of play with that line of like whether or not a trick is safe to do in any condition. So that's what I think risk assessment is. Also, as a good example, Adam and I, we don't do it at every festival anymore, but we used to do a trick where I will hold a rose in my mouth and he'll whip it out of my mouth with a 22-foot bullwhip. And I feel like that trick, like the more we do it, the more likely I am to get hit. And so like after a few years of doing that trick, and I trust him very much and he's very talented, but it's just like law of averages. After a certain time, when you do a trick, 200 times, something might happen. So we don't do that trick as much as we used to.
It was very impressive to see the pedals go everywhere.
It's a pretty cool trick. We still do it at the Texas Renaissance Festival. We do it there. But
that's where I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Getting back into like more of the business side of things as well. So, I mean, you're performing with the equipment that you're making as well. And you're making a tremendous number of these. What is it? What do you have planned, or do you have any future plans for DaKitty Whips itself? Are you looking to grow that, or is it just something you do on the side as you can?
Well,
what is that like?
I mean, honestly, I'm very lucky in the fact that because I do make so many whips and I am able to sell so many whips, and I'm like so grateful that people continue to buy my whips. That is actually like whip making is my kind of main job. If we talk about, because I've been able to cut back from performing a little bit throughout the years because I do have whip making as my, main source of income. Thank you. I know it's not easy to do, but I've worked really hard to get up to that point. There's so many different levels of whip making. And even if we're just talking about nylon, there's people who like really want to be innovative with it, really create different things, create a lot of different products, really, go order by order and really hone in whatever whip that person specifically wants. I really, really enjoy, and maybe this is just my anxiety, but I really enjoy knowing that I am providing a very good product over and over and over. So I don't have like huge plans to like change up my product line or, make little things here and there. I'll put different lengths in or something, but I have made stock whips. I know how to make stock whips. I don't provide them. I have made juggling whips. Juggling whips, honestly, I had to stop making because they are super hard on my hands. I made a few sets and you just have to pull the paracord so tight that I knew that if I continued to make those whips, I would decrease the other whips that I could make. So that was just a choice on my part. So I don't have like huge plans to change up my product line or increase it. Fancy plaiting is something I have done, but it's not something I plan to like offer for my whips because it takes so much more time to do. So I'm just like super happy and thrilled and love providing just really good whips that you can customize the colors and you can change the patterns up. But I have a very basic line of products that you can purchase and are always going to be good. That's what I really enjoy doing.
It sounds like consistency is your focus there.
Yeah, because like, when you're working on a new product, you have to work on that product for so long before you're comfortable selling it. Fire whips are a good example of that. Like they've gone off and on of my order list so many times because I'll either not have the wicking available or the wicking will change, and then I have to redo the design to make sure that the whip is still, as good as it was before. I just brought fire whips back because the wicking changed dramatically from what it used to be. So
That was on my list to ask you about.
Yeah.
What has changed, and tell me about your fire whips.
So the actual design of the whip is the same, right? So they're going to feel the same. It's the same burn time. But what happened is the Kevlar manufacturers, they used to have like a mix of like kind of cottony material or like fiberglass material in with the Kevlar. Now it is 100% Kevlar, which is great. It's way more durable. It holds up really, really well. But it's thicker. The feel is different. It's a little less absorbent. And I had to change basically the guts of the fire whip to make sure that it all still like tapered properly and fit into the handle properly. So that's and then we had to test to make sure that the burn time was the same, all of that. So it took a couple months of back and forth and kind of trying out different things. And also every time I would order in Kevlar, it would be a little bit different. It'd be like a different thickness. It would be a different, feel. But it seems to have leveled out. So they're back on the market. But yeah, essentially they're going to feel exactly the same. They have a slightly smaller fireball is really the only thing that I've noticed. But they last a lot longer.
So the whip itself lasts longer, or it holds a charge?
So yeah, the burn time, right? So like from the time you light it on fire for how long you can crack it is pretty much the same. So
that's my burn time. Okay.
Yeah. So the burn time is about the same. What's interesting about it is the just overall absorption seems to be less. So it's not picking up as much fuel that it then sprays off, right? So it's not picking up extra fuel, which is why the fireball is smaller. But the burn time seems to be the same. But my fire whips are all made to be rebuilt. Not all fire whips are. Sometimes you burn them out and then they're just trash. But mine, you can take the handle off and you can rebraid the overlay. And so that seems to be lasting a lot longer. Like this Kevlar is way more durable. So you can get more burns out of it.
I'm sure will like that. Less orders probably for you, but
you know what? They're so expensive though. Like I'm not going to begrudge anybody for wanting, and they can send it to me and it does cost the money to have the overlay rebraided. It's not, free. So I want people to have a good product that's going to last a while, even if that's less overall income for me. I don't want them to get a whip that they have to throw away after, 80 burns or whatever.
Sounds like you have enough orders to keep you busy either way.
It's true. It's true. Fire whips though, man, they're not easy to make, but they're quick. I do enjoy that. Like I made one today. Like started it. What is it? It's my time. It's about 5:47. I started it around 2 and I finished it maybe like an hour ago. So,
goodness,
like they go together pretty quick.
That's great. Is there anything that you have to be considering differently when you're making those versus making a paracord or other nylon?
I mean, the whole design. So the overall design of this fire whip was 100% Adam's doing. He spent a whole summer years ago and used tons of different Kevlar, different types. He made tons of different fire whips. He burned them all. He like really honed in on the best type of like the whip that felt the best, that worked the best, that kind of gave you the closest feel to an actual whip. Because that's always what I try to explain to people is that fire whips don't feel like regular whips. You can do your best to taper them, but they're bulky and they're heavy. Yeah. And it's never going to feel like a hybrid whip or like a bullwhip. So these whips seem to have the best feel out of what I've tried as far as fire whips. But even so, I always tell people like, you just have to work with it a little bit. It's not going to be as fluid.
Yeah. Do you perform?
It's a big chunky whip.
Have you performed with them?
I do not. They're scary. That's a lot of fire.
That's a lot of fire.
I'm very, very lucky to live and be married to someone who works with fire whips professionally day in, day out. So it's very easy if I want to change something, if I want to like kind of try a different thing, it's very easy for me to be like, hey, go try this, go use this, or like, test this Kevlar. Um, no, I don't love, I will stick with my fire knives. I don't love giant fire props. I'll leave that
Okay,
to people braver
fair
than me.
enough. Yeah, I was talking to some other people that work with fire out in California, and some people really, really love it and get into it. And I guess it's the more of a sense of real danger, even for the performer, that some people really like.
Yeah.
But
we've had, I don't know, we've had some scary, like just throughout the years. We do right now in my dad's show, I'm doing a sword fight with him with flaming swords. So basically the entire blade of the sword is wrapped with wicking and then we soak it in fuel. And so it's not like super dangerous because it's away from your body, but it's a lot of fire. And they've used
feel
those
that heat coming off of it. Sure.
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely hot. We've used those for a long time. Just the fire props that we have used in our shows, we've had enough little incidents here and there that I'm very humbled by fire. I have a lot of respect for people who choose to use that as their everyday prop.
Fair enough. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, speaking of talking to me a little bit about how the whip was made there, you do have some YouTube videos that you have taught people how to make. You have actually a really good one on making cracker that I really
thank
like.
you. Thank you.
Are you planning on doing any more of those? Have any thoughts on
I mean,
teaching?
no.
You're obviously have a great way of explaining things here. I'm very much enjoying it. But
right.
do we have commentary from someone else?
No, Adam is telling me he's making whippy gestures, which I think means he's going to go practice.
Okay.
Okay. He's going to abandon me with my dog. So as soon as she finishes her frozen Kong, we'll see how good she's going to be.
She can join the show too.
There you go. Yeah. So I don't have any like plans. I don't love making YouTube videos, which I think is also pretty evident if you watch my YouTube videos. I'm very like uncomfortable. I don't have like a ton of other information. I'm not like if people message me, because you know, as a whip maker, all of us will get people who will message you or email you and be like, tell me how to make this thing. And
right.
what I always try to say to people is like, I'm not going to tell you how to make an entire whip. If you have very specific questions, I'm happy to help you with a specific question. I'm not going to give you a pattern because even if I did, you wouldn't be able to make the same whip that I can make. No. You wouldn't know where the drops go. You wouldn't, you know, like it's just a very, I mean, how many times do we look up tutorials for something on YouTube that seems super easy and then you try it yourself and it doesn't work out. So,
yeah.
You know, so I don't plan on doing like kind of teaching tutorials or anything like that. If I do come across something I think is useful for someone, I would totally make a YouTube video for that, like changing a fall or making a cracker, like everyday stuff. Or I have one that's like about waxing a whip just because I think that people like to know what that is because they don't maybe understand what it's like when I say, oh, your whip is waxed. So little stuff like that, I'm always open to doing. But there's so many amazing whip crackers and YouTubers and like people out there uploading content so often. I don't feel like there's anything that I necessarily need to add to the conversation, you know?
I mean, maybe this has kind of been answered by the fact of the few videos that you have made. But if you were to be able to go back and like give yourself some advice as a younger whip cracker, whip maker, do you have anything in particular that you would want to tell yourself?
Oh my goodness. As a whip maker.
Yeah, if we focus on, let's focus on the whip making specifically.
Well, when it comes to YouTube, I don't know, just like be cooler. I don't know. It was during, also it was in 2020 when I was making those videos and we were all like, didn't have jobs and we were all very like stressed out. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just put videos on the internet. We were like living on my dad's property while he was trying to build a house. So the vibe was weird when I was trying to make those videos anyway. So I would just tell myself to not worry so much about like how I come off in those videos, because you end up being too stiff if you worry about that.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a minute ago feeling uncomfortable. I mean, I could see that a little bit, but I mean, you seem to have a wonderful, how shall I say, stage presence.
Oh, thank you. Well, there's a very different, when you're like, we play characters. My character is not that in depth, right? But I am playing a different person when I'm on stage. And it's very, very easy for me to do that on stage, or to be out in the festival day. And you have to be very like fun, and you have to talk to people for the entire day and walk around. That's super easy. When I have to be myself, I feel like that's a little bit harder to have that same, fluid kind of personality. But I don't know. It's fine. I don't mind those videos at all. I'm just like, oh, dude, chill out.
Why do you think that's harder?
Oh,
It's still you in a way.
Well, no, I don't know. So I guess like as a performer, being out talking to people, doing your shows, it's a very superficial level of who you are, right? Like you're performing, you're doing a show, you're doing dangerous stunts, you're super happy to be there, you're super happy to have everyone else be there. So you're kind of just generally very excited and in a good mood. You're a character, right? You would never see a Disney princess walking around Disney being in a bad mood. So it's a very easy,
fair enough,
character to portray. When you're being yourself, I feel like there's more pressure to have authenticity and to come off as you want to come off all the time. And like,
sure.
In this kind of scenario, it's not, an issue, but I feel like when I have to film a video and then stare at that video and edit it and then like do all these things, it's a little bit different, because I'll like critique every little thing I do. So I'd say like the difference is just there's less depth to performing on stage and being like that type of character.
Okay. Do you feel like there's you're forcing yourself to exhibit a certain specific quality, a certain specific emotion? You can never, like you said, a Disney princess can't be grumpy. So if you're having a bad day, you have to act like you're not, basically.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are no bad days.
No.
Like we have a joke. We have like an inside joke with a lot of our performer friends that someone started years ago. That if you walk up to someone and you say like, "How's your day going?" You'll say, "Best day ever." That's just what you say. Like, oh, it could be pouring rain. There could be 3 people in the audience. If someone were to say, "How's your day going?" Best day ever. Because that's just what you have to pretend. You have to be having the best day ever, no matter what your day actually is.
Wow. That's got to feel really exhausting.
Well, it's only 2 days a week. So
okay. Fair enough. You don't
have to do it backstage. It's just you would never want to like come out to a festival and you're seeing someone perform. You don't want to get a feeling that they don't want to be there. You're like,
that's true.
And honestly, it's very rare that any of us don't want to be there. I think, if you have a cold or if you've hurt yourself, there's little things like that. Everyone has an off day. But in general, we all do shows because we genuinely love to do them. We love to perform. We enjoy being in front of an audience and doing tricks and doing shows. And, so I think it's overall very rare. But when you're doing anything every weekend for a year, you're going to have days where you're like, oh man,
of course,
I need a Red Bull, like something like that,
Need some extra wings today.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to compare it to my daily life, and not that mine is everyone else's, but I go visit someone's desk because their computer's broken. That's my thing. That's what I do during the day. And when I'm having a bad day, I'm interacting differently with them. Yes, I need to have customer service. need to smile. But I can still show that I'm not having a great day. I don't have to be as friendly on those days when they happen. So it does. You're a stronger person than I. So good job.
My dad always used to tell me, my dad's given me a lot of advice over the years. And he always likes to say, this might be the first time anyone's ever going to see you and the last time they're ever going to see you. And so if you're putting on a show and you're not feeling great and you don't want to have a good show, that's the only impression you're ever going to make for some people. they don't get to see you every day in and out every weekend. So you always want to put your best foot forward when you're being a professional, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think we all try to do that no matter, what your job is. Definitely.
Right. I mean, the people at the grocery store, I'm sure, do the same thing. All the people in my IT department, they try to do their same thing.
I would not want to be in customer service ever. Like, no one comes up to me and like has complaints about their computer while I'm passing the hat. Like, I wouldn't know what to, like, I feel like that's
Christian,
that's different. Very different environment, and in ways a lot harder to deal with upset, frustrated people.
I don't have drunk people yelling at me though, either way. So
that's true. Wow. There's goodness. Oh my goodness.
Hi.
Oh my goodness.
She's adorable.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, hecklers are their own thing.
Have you had some funny experiences with audience members?
I mean, yeah, of course. We all have. I
haven't, but
well, okay. Do you generally work in front of an audience though? Because if you did,
my audience is of one, but of usually so.
There you go. No, I do find it interesting. I mean, we interact with so many people on a daily basis, and you absolutely will have drunk people. Usually it just amounts to people yelling or, trying to be funny, or it's annoying but harmless. I would say 95% of the time. Every once in a while in our jobs, like you'll get someone who will be too drunk and they'll run up on stage. And usually you can control that situation to a certain degree. I've definitely had people just yell out inappropriate things on stage, which usually we can shut down pretty quick because I'll be like, hey, I'm up here with my dad. Like, maybe don't do that. Like we'll make some kind of joke about it. I would say like the weirdest, most off-putting interactions you'll have with people are usually when it's like either before the show or after the show, because people don't always have like a great regulatory system for what it's okay to say to someone, or they might think that it's okay to say something. I think the funniest example I have is a couple years ago at the Texas Renaissance Festival. There was a couple in our front row and we were setting up the show. So I was putting props out, and the woman looked at me and she was like, "Oh, you're really starting to show your age." And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you. That's so kind of you to say." And she was like, "Well, I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just I've seen you for a long time and you're finally starting to look a little older." And I was like, "Okay, well, I appreciate your input. Have a good day." At the end of the show, her husband came up and her husband tipped me $35, and he was like, "I'm so sorry." So,
oh my gosh, how rude!
But like, it is absolutely rude. But also, I think in people's minds, they don't understand that that's not something that they should say, because we are characters up on a stage to some degree. They don't know us and they do expect us to stay the same. So as soon as, we do start to look different, people like to comment on it, which isn't always bad, but sometimes it's just a little awkward. I do wonder how much money that guy went through though during that day, because I bet I wasn't the only person who she said something to.
Like, honey, I've run out of money. It's time to go.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
But yeah, so we'll get stuff like that. But
that was very graceful of you to respond that way. It would have been difficult, I'm sure, for other people to not say something.
Yeah, you get used to it. It's all just work. It's all just a job. You gotta be polite and friendly, even when people are, I don't know, maybe had one too many beers. That's fine.
Sure. Do you feel like being in whip making, you're by yourself in the quiet. You've got your pattern that you know exactly how things are going to go. Mm-hmm. It feels very different than performing on a stage. About as different as it can get, actually.
Totally, yes.
From a crowd to just you. What is it about that you think that's... is it a release of some sort? Is it zen, or what are you going through mentally while you're making a whip that's different than when you're on stage?
Well, there's a lot less pressure. Overall, because say I'm halfway through a whip and I've messed something up, I can unbraid that whip, right? No
True.
one's going to know about it. I can fix the situation. I mean, I've messed stuff up and I've had to redo things and I've had to change stuff, so definitely messing up in front of a giant audience of people is way more pressure than just messing something up at home that you can fix on your own time. I have always, and I think this just is it's not necessarily from whip making, but it's a skill that I've already had, is that I've always just really enjoyed quiet crafting. I've done piecework my whole life. So even before I made whips, Renaissance festivals will usually have a booth that sells like hair garlands, right?
Yeah.
People have to make those garlands. So I would usually work for those companies and I would wrap flower garlands like all week long, and I'd make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds like in a week.
Wow.
So my brain is very accustomed to just crafting piecework, making something, being quiet, staying focused. And then I'm usually listening to an audiobook like 90% of the time, or a podcast or something like that. So I always have something going on too. So my time doesn't feel, wasted, or it doesn't feel like I'm just standing there whip making. So I wouldn't say it's like meditative. It's tiring, just like any other thing that you'll do for hours and hours. I'll usually braid for maybe like 3-4 hours at a time, and then I might like take a break and do something else, and I might come back to it later. Luckily I'm self-employed, so I can kind of work on my own time. But I think I'm just happen to be really, really good at just quietly doing the same thing over and over and like enjoying that process.
Would you say that you're an introvert by nature then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you need that recharge time kind of on quiet. That's how I refer to myself. That's my descriptor is I lose energy with people. I gain energy by myself.
Absolutely. And it's like, I enjoy being around people, like I think any like introvert does, but that's not my go-to thing. It's much easier for me to just like hang out at home. So if I can hang out at home and also work, like that's just a plus,
Yeah, exactly. Did you have you mentioned garland before this. Were you always a DIYer of some sort, maker,
always
builder?
a crafter. I've been like crafter. A crocheter, a knitter since I was like a teen. I used to knit like gifts for pretty much every holiday for all members of my family and friends. They all had cool. Backpacks and scarves and hats and gloves. Like they had anything they could ever want. So I always did that. I always loved my mom talking about like the Renaissance festival space. So my dad has always been a performer. My mom has worked at Renaissance festivals since the late 70s when they first started in California. And she has made pillows and tapestry hangings since the beginnings. She went to art school for design, and she was a seamstress starting in her 20s. So making stuff has been as big of a part of my life as performing has. I've never been good at sewing. That's 100% of my mom thing. But my crafting skills did go into other genres. So like I cross stitch stuff all the time. I have like any old grandma hobby that you can think of. I'm probably pretty good at it. Right. Like,
whip making and macrame have a lot of overlap actually.
They do. And I've done that too. Yeah. I mean, it's just braiding. Like I think
it is.
The skill itself is just a round braid, but I think where whip making comes in is then knowing like how to taper a whip and how heavy a whip needs to be, and like all those little things that you really need to dial in to create a good product. That just comes with experience, making something over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the. I had a bullet point to ask you about, like what goes into making a good whip, or how do you pick a good whip, and I think those are exactly the sort of things that go into it. It's not just tying a knot over and over and over. It's all of those things you were saying. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like any of those, I don't know, what would you say sets you apart as a whip maker from someone else that's offering similar products?
I mean, wow, that's so hard because there's so many people making whips right now, and so many of them are good. Honestly, like I have a lot of experience using whips.
Hmm.
And I have had this business for like 10, 11 years. So there is just a general amount of experience
Oh yeah.
having made so many whips over and over. I mean, I am not going to go out there and say like, oh, I think my products are better than anyone. Like it's not that type of thing. But I think that you can know that if you're ordering a whip from me, it will be exactly what it should be,
Right.
which is
You
something
know
I'm
what
really
it's
proud of.
supposed to look like. You have
Yeah.
enough experience.
And I absolutely like people will email me all the time and ask for things I don't make or don't normally make. And I much rather send them to someone who does make that product well than have me make a product that might be okay. Like I haven't made a stock whip in 5 years. I'm not just going to make you one because you asked me to and send it off. Like I'm going to send you to someone who can create that
Right.
product perfectly for you. So I would say just like consistency again is just kind of like you're going to get a good quality product for what I'm selling
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
me.
Absolutely. And I think it's notable that in a, I would say primarily male dominated industry, that you stand up among the, if not the highest, certainly among the highest, as when someone points to what is the place to go get a performance hybrid, I would say your name is number one. And that's extremely impressive. And so it certainly hats off to you for that. That is
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm
wonderful.
super grateful. I mean, I'm so grateful to everyone who has bought whips for me, continues to buy whips for me. I have so many repeat customers, which always feels so good because you're giving a product that people like if they're going to continue to buy it
Yeah.
over and over. And like everyone who recommends me, I'm lucky enough to make whips for a vast majority of Renaissance performers who use whips. Um, and so like I'm very lucky to have all of them promoting my products and recommending me to other people. uh I'm very lucky and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful, so I'm just going to keep putting out good products and just keep
Good.
going you know
I was complete what transparency. I was talking to Kat Fimple, and she
Yeah,
gave me some. We were trying to come up with some good
she just
questions
bought a
for you.
fire whip from me at
She
WhipCon.
did. Oh,
Yeah.
can't wait to see that. So she had some questions for you as well. So these last couple are mixed in with what she was wanting to know from you.
Okay.
First and foremost, she says more pictures of Violet, please. Like
Okay.
just like that needs to be put like top priority.
I
Of
mean,
course.
people say that sometimes, and I just want to say, you guys, my camera roll is like 80% dog photos, so it's like that's not an undoable thing. Like, be careful what you ask for.
I fully support this request.
Or just follow me on Facebook because that's all I post on Facebook is dog
I should do
photos.
that. I've done already. Obviously, you were part of. Yeah, you and Adam put on WhipCon 2024 this year, and into the last 7, 8 years now.
Something like that.
Yeah, just so that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It went really well. I want to know your perspective of how that went. One of the things that Kat was asking me to ask you was about kind of the number of women that were represented at WhipCon was lower percentage than men. I don't really know the percentage, but what do you think we could do to like bring that up? How can we get more women into whip cracking? How can we have better representation there? And I mean, it's really awesome to see just everybody getting into whip cracking.
Right.
And when you think about it, it's
Yeah,
definitely
no,
a
I think that's
demographic
a
that's not.
great, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a super great question. I think that, uh, so for like WhipCon this past year, right, 2024, and I will say, so in general, uh, the whole WhipCon idea is like 100% Adam's like baby, right? Like he really wanted to do that because we work so much, and every other like Western convention, whip convention thing is always happening while we're working. So
Oh,
he
yeah.
really wanted to put something on that we could attend, like that we could be at and have a meetup with people. So that the whole convention is really like his, you know, brainchild. And then I am just a very organized person in general. So through the years, like it's just a lot easier for me to make sure everything's running smoothly and is organized and all that stuff. So it's very much a joint effort, but it's definitely Adam's like thing, you know? But this past year, we did add, we added like a novice category to a couple of the different. So we had a bull or like a whip obstacle course, which had a novice category, and the single whip freestyle had a novice category. And that was done to try to open things up a little bit more and make people feel a little more comfortable. When we initially had talked about that, Adam and I, he was talking about doing a women's category, specifically women.
Okay.
Personally, I think in 2024, that is an antiquated, like this isn't golf, right?
Right.
I don't feel like just saying women's and men's is, I just don't feel like it's appropriate anymore in a lot of different things. I feel like there's a big, you know, there's a scope of people, and I don't feel like it needs to be kind of categories. I think that bringing it down to skill is a little bit better. And so novice category basically just meant you had never won any awards for whip cracking at any time in your life from anywhere. So that, I think that went really well. We had a lot of competitors in both of those categories. People seem to have a lot of fun. How to bring more women into the sport in general. I think there are a lot of women in whip cracking. I feel like that's a global question, right? Like, how do we bring more women into any sport, any environment? And like, not even just women, just like minorities in general, I feel like are definitely underrepresented in whip cracking in general. So I wish I had a great answer for that. Like, that's a great question. I think just creating safe spaces for people to come out and know that they, no matter what their skill level and they want to try to compete, that is 100% okay. And we try really hard to do that. And like, who knows, maybe we'll try to come up with it. It's just at some point, the day is only so long, which kind of limits us to the types of categories we can have.
That's true.
We can only do so much. We've had to take a couple away to kind of add others in throughout the years. So that's like a back and forth thing. I wish we could have just like a kids category, like, you know, all different levels.
Right.
But there's just not enough time in the day, especially with the whip making competition now too. But yeah, I think just creating, as far as WhipCon goes, like a very open, safe space where women know that they are welcome, where minorities know they're welcome. Like everybody, whoever wants to be a whip cracker can come out, can compete, can feel like they are in a supportive environment, which we do try to do with all the competitions there. But like big picture, man, I have no idea. I wish I was that smart.
Well, I was assuming you were. I mean, you've got such a great presence, and like you said, you're so organized. It felt like it's just as you guys are putting this together, and you get feedback from everybody. I mean, if there's anything I can do, I have a small platform as well here, and I'm hoping to, you know, this will spread around and people will be interested in the sport. Doing my little part here.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think there's room for another event like WhipCon elsewhere in the country, other times of the year?
100%. Anyone else wants to do it, that we're not going to do it. No, I mean, there have been a couple people who have talked about putting on I mean, we're just renting a park and putting something together. And like, you know, we're very lucky to have like the resources to get prizes for people. Like we donate a lot of stuff ourselves. Like we have the funds to put that on. And then now, because when we first started WhipCon, kind of everything was free. We would just rent the park and you could come compete if you wanted to. And then we did start charging, it's $20 to compete in anything, because that kind of offsets the cost of the park, right?
Right.
So we did start doing that just kind of so we could keep it going, because we did find after a couple years, like it just wasn't. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's definitely, you know, we don't make money off of it, but we don't need to. That's fine. We come out and we just want to put it on. So if we can get anywhere close to breaking even, that's all we need. And I know there have been people talking about doing like an East Coast WhipCon. I think it's just a little more difficult to gather all of those resources than people think it is.
Right.
It's difficult to find like a park where you're not going to like offend anybody, or kids aren't going to be there. You know, it's hard to find all those places, but that would be super cool if there were more WhipCons.
I mean, I've had this same conversation with probably 4 or 5 different people.
Mm-hmm.
Not on this show, but so like yesterday, I had a conversation with Reed, who is here also in Fort Worth, Texas, and I went to lunch with him, and I brought some whips, and we just walked out. He works in the stockyards. So we went out in the street and we just cracked whips, and people just stopped. Nobody ducked in for cover.
That's Texas.
That's Texas. It's normal. So that would, and we just got to thinking, I mean, this would be, I mean, there's not that big of a whip community here that's into sport cracking. The whip community is, you know, people that are actually herding cows. So I don't know how many of them would come to a WhipCon here that live here, but it certainly would be a cool venue to be in, like in the Fort Worth Stockyards, for example.
Absolutely.
Or, I mean, just watching the Super Bowl this year, Vegas would be an amazing place to have a WhipCon. Lots of performers, lots of shows. Also, I don't think whips would be too weird there.
Right.
And is anything weird in New York, like at all?
Yeah, East Coast. I think those are all great. Yeah, that's all great options.
And like Ian and Alyssa both are out on the East Coast, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I think they could certainly find an awesome venue out there. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be talking to you and getting some tips, or see if we can.
I think it's all. I know a couple of people tried to do one a couple years ago, and they had some big ideas, and it unfortunately just didn't pan out. But I think that it's a completely doable thing. Part of the reason that we chose LA, there was multiple facets to that. One, we already spend the winter in Arizona, so it's pretty close by. The weather is fairly nice in the winter, in January. And LA already had, like, they have the whip cracking enthusiasts. Like, they already had a pretty big group of whip crackers in that area. And so we knew that regardless if anybody flew out or could make it, and we put on an event there, there'd still be a pretty big group of people who would want to come out and were local to that area. And I think that's also, like you were saying, a big part of why it works in LA so well. You kind of have to find, if you put one on in the middle of nowhere and there's maybe 3 whip crackers within a 100-mile radius, it's really difficult to pull a crowd for that. So that's definitely a big plus to doing it in like that Burbank area.
Yeah, I even this past January at WhipCon, like people just randomly were there, and like just park visitors, and they were standing off to the side watching. And there was one, I actually went up to a family. They had 2 or 3 little kids. I think the youngest one was barely able to walk, and I had my beautiful Joe Strain whip with me. Mm-hmm. So I went over there. I knelt down like 10 feet away. I'm like, Mom and Dad's okay with it. I've got it coiled up. If they want to like touch the whip, I'll crack it. I'll step away. And just by the end, they were just jumping up and down, squealing. It was wonderful. And they were, and it wasn't weird. Like they were there, like, this is California. This is normal. We'll watch. And just, I don't know if those kids are going to get into sport cracking later, but it became something cool for them that day.
Absolutely. So that's super cool. I love working with kids. Like, I know Adam does lessons, like whip lessons. I won't do whip lessons with adults, but I do whip lessons with kids when people approach me, because I love working with them.
It's so rewarding.
It's super fun to like teach a kid to crack a whip. So.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's something about their lack of ego, and they're so open about their excitement and their frustration. And as well as being, most of them are very teachable without pre-learned things. That's so cool.
ESO started when I was really, really young, so I think that's a fun thing for me to then like be like, well, no, you can do it. I started when I was younger than you, So it's kind of like a goal to reach. Like, she could do it. I could do it. I know. Now she's sitting in my lap. We'll see how much longer we can get before she turns into a monster.
I have had you over an hour, and I do want to be respectful of yours and Violet's time here.
It's all Violet's time, man. My schedule is her schedule, quite honestly.
She needs a little sister or something. That's what she needs. So another Violet.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
You
no.
talk to Adam about that. If you can
Okay.
convince him that she needs a sister, I am all for it. I have not yet done so.
Is there any? Do you have to be careful with the whips around Violet? Does she help you make the whips? Does she like get in the way when Adam is cracking?
You know what? I should post more pictures. I have so many photos of her tangled up, like photos facing my feet of just, you see my feet and you see a bunch of whip strands and she's just like upside down with like 2 whip strands in her mouth. I have a lot of photos like that. She, for the most part, doesn't care. Like when I'm working, she sleeps through most of the day. But once in a while, she will decide it's playtime while I'm working, and she will tangle herself up in the
Oh
strands
my
and I have to
goodness!
stop.
Yeah, you got to post that.
But we mostly, having a dog, you just have to make sure you're keeping, like, she will chew up a leather whip in 2 seconds if we let her. She loves leather. And she has a little piece of like kangaroo hide that I cut out for her that she just like carries around the house. So that's what we mostly have to be careful of with her. She doesn't really care about the nylon ones, but if something smells delicious to her, she'll be all over it. So
Right. I love the pictures. Blake Gorey has a cat that is always tangled up in the laces. He's posting pictures. It's always really entertaining to see. Well, thank you very much. It's just been a real pleasure speaking with you about all this. If somebody wants to order a whip from you, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you to place an order?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to DaKittyWhips.com and email me from there. They can go to Facebook or Instagram and message. Instagram, I answer less, but I'll eventually get to you. Email is pretty much right away. And my Instagram and Facebook are both DaKitty Whips as well. So I'm pretty easy to find.
And you keep some whips in stock, I see here on your Facebook page?
Sometimes. It truly depends on how busy. Yeah, look at that. I only have 1 left right now. So in-stock whips are whips that I will make when I have free time between orders, which is what I try to explain to people. I don't always have free time between orders, so they occasionally are very few and far between. But
fair enough.
When I have a little time.
The Don Juan and Esmeralda pin here, which I got my own copy of out at WhipChat, which is awesome. I'm so excited
love those
to have
pins so much. And I will say, hold on, give me 1 second. I can stop her.
Violet, calm down.
She's the worst dog in the world. Okay, come here. So I will say my proudest thing with that merchandise, with that pin, is that it's our first ever merchandise with Don Juan's little white mustache on it.
Oh, yeah.
All of our other t-shirts, all of our everything has like his old school black and blue mustache.
Didn't even notice that. That's great.
Right?
We both have whips, swords. I love it.
This pin was drawn. There's an incredibly talented artist named Thomas Boatwright who has done so much work for so many different Renaissance Festival performers, and he drew the design for that pin based off of a photo of my dad and I that someone took last year here at this festival where we're back to back on stage, and he did a great job.
Yeah, he really did. I highly recommend. It's a wonderful little. It's just it's well made. So
I put them on there because I have so many of them. So I was like, if you want to put it in your whip order, go ahead.
Yeah, everybody should get one. Well, Dakota, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any other links or anything you want to let everyone know?
Do it. As long as I feel like I answered your questions to the best of my ability.
You absolutely have. Thank you very much. And as I tell everyone at the end of my shows, to keep on cracking.
Nice.
Thank you, Dakota. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Just want to thank Dakota again for being on the show and for sharing so much of her stories and her experience with us. Thank you very much, Dakota. And remember, if you would like to help out the show, there are several ways you can do that. I really appreciate anything you guys can do. We do have a donate button over at whipchatpodcast.com/donate. But, if you're on iTunes listening to this in the audio, hit subscribe on the podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, like and subscribe. That always helps a lot. So I appreciate it and hope to see you on the next one. Keep on cracking.